The Game Schooler Podcast is a weekly audio show that educates new and experienced gamers about the awesomeness of tabletop gaming. In this week's episode, we'll cover 10 Days in the USA, our Game of the Week, discuss handling disagreements about games in the School of Gaming, and wrap it up by revealing our high five games that surprised us. Welcome to the Game Schooler Podcast. I'm your host, Doug Kotecki, along with my co-host, Dr. Michael McCabe. How's it going, Michael?
What's going on, Doug? Great to be here. Great to get episode 175 rolling. Can you believe we're at 175?
That's insane to me. I feel
It is.
And it's sometimes I go back and I'm on our website and I'm looking at like a game and I go, oh, when did we talk about this? And it's like, it'll be something in the 30s or 40s. I'm like, It wasn't that long ago that we talked about this game.
Yeah. Well, even last week with Role Player Adventures, we had like 6 months in between one campaign to another campaign. I thought, that's not possible. We didn't go half a year without playing that game.
Well, time flies when you're talking about games and having fun.
Well, and raising kids and working and raising kids and working and trying to play the occasional board game, right?
Every once in a while.
Yeah.
As people are listening to this, I am currently on vacation.
Congratulations.
Thank you, which is exciting. But it does remind me of a little discussion that happened on our Discord server a couple weeks ago, which was about the concept of mental space and just the idea of the luxury. And I think this is something a lot of reviewers miss out on, which is the luxury to have the mental space after a long day or after working to play something heavier.
Yeah.
Or, something that requires a lot of mental brain power, whether that's you as an adult or getting your kids to the table. After they've gone to school, they come home, they have practice and stuff, and they're fried. They're mentally fried. And, there's people out there that are working 2 or 3 jobs and, they're exhausted when they get home. And I think when you listen to the hypeness and some of the other reviewers out there that are churning and burning and talking about some of these games, it makes me appreciate, and I'll tie it back into the idea of what's awesome in gaming, but appreciates that there are light, filler family games out there that don't require that burden, that sometimes it's okay to have a 10-minute game and that's it, and hopefully it gives you some time to freshen your brain and just relax and take a break. And I just feel like a lot of times those games, which I think are awesome and have such a unique need in our hobby and our society as a whole, kind of get poo-pooed on because, well, there wasn't enough crunchy choices and I didn't get to do this and it wasn't meaningful. And it's like, no, the meaningful comes from the people that you're spending the time with, and the fact that you're spending that time is where the meaning comes from, not what you're doing in the game. And I just thought that was a good thing to highlight.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I know, I mean, I enjoy a hobby level game as much as anybody, and I'm on a search and a quest I'm always trying to learn one, right? But at the same time, we're just coming off of Father's Day here, and usually for my birthday and Father's Day, it would be like, okay, kids, here's the obligatory new game you're going to learn. This is the one game I really want to play. And this year I approached it differently, where it was, what's one game or 2 games that you would want to replay? If we were going to have a games day, everybody, there's no new games coming. We're going to replay games that live in our basement. And my wife said Azul and Quacks of Quedlinburg, and my oldest daughter said Dice Throne. It's like, well, that's all we need for a game day right there.
Yeah.
And we haven't talked about any of this off air. It's just interesting that, that when folks get busy, it is nice to not have the work of learning a rule book, learning a new system, but let's just get out there and play.
Yeah.
And I think future episodes, too, based on some of the recent Discord chatter, rule books, Doug. That's one that continues to come up. And the folks on the Game Schooler Podcast Discord really do a nice job of giving a heads up of, oh, this was a tough rule book, or I really liked this part of the rule book.
Yeah.
So not that any of that connects to what you're talking about, but I kind of wanted to talk to.
It's the thing about, like, my day job is not overly stressful, but sometimes after a full day of work and then depending on what happens on the time between work and dinner and then game night after, like, my mental capacity to handle something is way different than if, you know, we're going to a cabin con and we're waking up and it's 9 o'clock and I'm fresh.
Yeah.
It's like what I can dive into then compared to what I can dive in at 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night. And it's just such an overlooked part of the hobby, which almost tends to rely on the fact or the assumption that everyone has millions of dollars to spend on games and millions of hours to play them.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't exist. And even if you do have the time, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's good time to be playing a game, right? Like, there's different grades of what time of what your mental capacity is, even though you physically have the availability to play a game. So,
well, and there's so many variables. And that's just another thing to keep in mind as we talk about games. Our life experiences don't match anyone else's. Mine don't match yours. Yours don't match mine. Like, there's so many different variables that go into the hobby. And we try to give that when we announce our caveats and our high five, or just when we're giving our perceptions of a game. But it does seem like as convention season is here and people are reviewing a ton of games, sometimes those variables aren't always mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. As far as other things that are awesome, there is an announcement of In the Footsteps of Marie Curie. I don't know if you saw that one.
Yeah, I did see that.
This is by the same company, and I believe the same designers that did In the Footsteps of Darwin, which we reviewed on the show a couple weeks back or a couple months. Who knows? It's probably been
September
years.
2023, Doug.
Based on the way that I calculate time, it's been years since we've talked about that. But it looks like an interesting game based on subject matter and the fact that I think it's like 30 to 45 minutes, so a quick play time and some different mechanisms from what was in the footsteps of Darwin. So that's awesome, and I was looking forward to it and thought I'd mention it.
Yeah, different design team.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Same art, though. Very similar art style.
Yeah, and I did a quick design, just a quick Board Game Geek search in real time. So somebody will correct us if we're wrong on that. Thank you.
So what's awesome for you, Michael?
Well, I had something interesting happen that I think you'll get a chuckle on, and you'll be able to make fun of me a little bit. And also just an interesting part of the hobby that, you know, I'm learning. I'm just trying to figure out what's going on out there. But I don't know if are you familiar with the publisher GMT? They make a lot of different war games and things like that. And GMT is a long-standing program. And I should know this coming in, but clearly I'm just freestyling here because this just happened prior to recording, where they have like a GMT 500, where once they hit 500 orders, then boom, they charge the cards and they ship it, right?
Yeah.
And it's supposed to happen fairly quickly. Well, DeVere is a publisher that I've really been getting into a lot of their games over the last 12 to 15 months, whether it's Lacrimosa, Three Ring Circus, Mille Fiori, which is right behind me here on the bench. And they ran a DeVere 500 for the good Dr. Reiner Knizia's Mille Fiori. So it was an expansion for Mille Fiori, to be clear.
Okay.
And I'd been following it.
You needed another copy.
Exactly, right? I'd been following it, and I was like, you know, I just kind of like if you back a Kickstarter to follow it, like if you back a Kickstarter at $1, and this was more than $1, but and so in April I was like, yeah, I'll throw a little bit down and see what happens. And then just this past week, I was in the house and I was announcing, and I'm like, what's this $21 on the card? Because my phone buzzed. And I'm like, I didn't order. Did anyone order anything? So I'm right before I go on Scam Patrol, and my wife's like, hey, it's Father's Day. Don't go searching. And so I'm just scratching my head. And for 3 days, I'm like, what is this 2109? And I got a notification today, right before we recorded, that it'll be here in 2 days, and it's shipped. And I thought, whoa, is that different from what I'm used to with Kickstarter? When I back a Kickstarter, it's hurry up and back it now, wait 2 to 3 years, and it will arrive.
Maybe.
And this thing's like, oh gosh, now I really got to dive in and get into the base game and get other people to play with because it doesn't have solo. I got to get ready for this expansion. But it was just kind of one of those cool moments of how the hobby is evolving as well. It was like only about 6 weeks ago when I said, yep, I'm interested in this, sign me up. And then it was enough time for me to forget that I had committed $21.09, but still short enough time where I'm excited. This is going to be here on Monday. So by the time you get back from vacation, I will have had my first DeVere 500 order fulfilled.
Do you know when that started? Like, did you get in when it started, or had it been running for a while? That you
It had been running
of?
for a while,
Okay.
and I was actually
So you were backer
498th. No, I really was, and I could look at, but I was right at the tail end, and I'd been following it on BGG. I heard it on the Dice Tower News, and it was just I'm on DeVere's site a lot, learning about different games that are coming out as well. So it was kind of interesting, and I just thought that would be a cool. I think of the other companies where if they were to do the print on demand and how that would change the hobby, because by and large, we talk about a lot of different games, but both of our collections are filled with about a dozen companies, largely, right? Like when you do your Calyx, imagine if Days of Wonder did a print on demand like that, where you could get it 60 days later. I think Doug Kotecki would be a customer of that. So it was just interesting.
Yeah, I'm surprised how they did that. There must not be a bunch of components in there, huh? Like a lot of cards and things like that, as opposed to
my
bits?
expectations are really low, Doug, because there wasn't a bunch of shipping tacked onto it either. Yeah, I mean, for a $20 expansion, I think it's a couple of ships, and then I'm recalling this, but I think part of the board is also expanded on, like a couple of tracks added. It's a Reiner game, so add a mechanism, add a track, and keep it going.
So I'd be interested to see follow up in 175 episodes. With this, to see where this falls as far as where you are on your expansion journey. Let's put it that way. If this will be a thing where it's like, all right, I haven't really even played the base game. I bought the expansion. Now when I go and get it out, I feel like throwing the expansion is throwing too much at people, so I'm always going to play the base game, or is it more of a solo
Where
expedition?
I'm currently at, and where I've been at for about the last 12 months, is if I really like a game, and if I know I want to play it again in the next 6 months, I'll get an expansion to go with it. But where I've changed from the last year or so, I don't need all the expansions. And Everdell really changed me on that. I mean, when they came out with the complete collection and then a promo pack like 5 days after that, and then Far Shore, it's like, well, I just can't keep up. You know? But yeah, that'll be interesting to see.
All right. Well, Michael mentioned my what's on my shelf. This is going to be a quick one this week because the first one is we're back up to a Days of Wonder shelf. We've branched all the way up to the top of column 3, and that is Ticket to Ride is the first one. Talked about that in episode 2. Don't ever listen to that. Should probably be scrubbed from the internet.
Trash. Get rid of it.
Something on my shelf of shame, actually, is Ticket to Ride United Kingdom and Pennsylvania, which I really want to play because the United Kingdom one has power-ups, and the Pennsylvania one has stocks, both things that I like. Just haven't gotten them to the table. The next ones are Ticket to Ride London and New York, which we talked about in episode 72. Doesn't that seem like that was sooner? Not that long ago?
No, that sounds about right.
That sounds like 100 episodes ago. Not
2 years
to me.
ago, yeah.
And then Heat, which we talked about in episode 103. So that's what's on the shelf. And for those of you eagle-eared listeners, Ticket to Ride Europe is not on there because I have the 10th anniversary or 15th anniversary edition. that sits perched atop the Calyx because it's too large to fit into a standard shelf.
I feel embarrassed. I have that game and I still haven't played it.
I played it with the family. They enjoyed it.
Oh, good. What mechanism does that add? That adds
The stations.
the stations, yeah.
And then
Yeah,
I think like through mountains or something.
Yeah. Now, heat. We talked about expansions. Wouldn't that be a great little expansion to add? Why wouldn't you want to add 2 more maps and 2 more cars?
Because
You
I'm
give
not
me a hard
playing,
time
I'm
about
not playing the
expansion?
I'm not paying the 4 or 5 maps that I already have.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
a
the
dumb
thing where
problem.
I've gotten to where it's like when I'm not playing those, if I'm not playing what's in the base box, why do I need the expansion?
That's spot on. That's a great point. Put that on the back of a T-shirt. That's really good. At that point, you're just consuming games, right?
Yeah,
At
or
that
not even
point, it's
consuming
just-
them.
Well, but you're a different type of consumption.
Yeah, consumerism.
Yeah, not even collector. It's yeah, that's an issue.
Habitual.
Been there.
It's addiction.
Yeah.
All right, but well, on that positive note, anything else awesome you want to talk about?
Oh, let me just scan here quick. Well, no, folks, we are in summer, so all that means, we'll do our best to keep up with our weekly recording. I travel for work. There's family vacations. There's all sorts of events for our kiddos, so we just ask for a little bit of grace if we have a week off here or there. We're usually very diligent with, doing a weekly podcast, but that was just one thing I wanted to make sure I get in the front segment, not because of Doug, but really because of my schedule. And so I kind of see what's coming here the next 6 to 8 weeks, and I look forward to recording every week. But that's just one thing, kind of looking like, I hope we can get to Gen Con and keep our weekly routine going.
We'll be fine. We'll double
Yeah.
up. We can record late at night into the wee hours.
How about 4:30 a.m., Doug? You want to do a early morning record?
That time doesn't exist, Michael. That's not. Those numbers are not on my clock.
It's actually really nice this time of year in Wisconsin.
I bet it is. Yeah, real cozy, nice little chill in the air. Sign up for our Discord if you haven't already. Gameschooler.com/Discord. And join the conversation. People talking about what they're playing, asking questions, and sharing game schooling and family games. Spread the word about our podcast. We appreciate that. If you feel so inclined, nay, I demand you go on to Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review, help us out there. We don't ask for much, but any little thing that you can do there will help us out immensely. And if you have any questions or comments, reach out to us at email@gameschooler.com. There's also a contact form on our website. So
Yeah, and
plenty of ways to
speaking
get
of
a
our-
hold with us.
Sorry to jump
you're
in
good.
over the top. But speaking of our Discord, it's really nice to see people who have been listening from episode 2, from the beginning, that are in our
apologize.
Discord. And, so we recognize your usernames and know who you are. At least I feel that way. And it's nice to have that community, and we appreciate you being in there. And it's cool to see some of the relationships that have grown too among the people in the Discord. So it's a really welcoming group of people, and they have great suggestions as well.
Yeah, so check that out. With that out of the way, let's move on to the game of the week.
The game of the week. The game of the week is an in-depth look at a family-friendly game we think you should try if you get the chance. This week's game is awesome. It's 10 Days in the USA. Doug, give us the stats.
All right, published by the Op. It was originally released in 2003, but the new version just came out this year, not too long ago. The designers are Alan R. Moon and Aaron Weisblum, and the art is by Gustav O. Halmers. 2 to 4 players, about 30 minutes, 10 plus on the side of the box. Board Game Geek says 8 plus. I'm leaning more towards the 10 plus, wouldn't you? There's a kind of a fundamental understanding of geography and reading that would come into play.
Well,
This is
and order of operations and comprehension. Yeah.
Yep. So this is going to be a family game for us, and it is a 2004 Mensa Select winner. And this one is going to be
Thank you,
kind of
Doug.
cool. I voted twice. This is going to be cool because the description is going to pretty much teach you the game and you'll be off and running. It's one of those type of games. You have 10 days in the USA. Travel the country by jet, car, and on foot. Plan your trip from start to finish using destination and transportation cards. With a little luck and clever planning, you just might outwit your fellow travelers. Players all flip cards one at a time, examine them, and put them in the 10 days of their tile tray in any order. So you have a little tile tray in front of you that's numbered day 1 all the way through day 10. You're going to grab one card at a time and fill up your board. Then, in turn order, you're going to draw a card from one of the 3 face-up piles or a face-down pile, and the new card that you take may replace one tile in your tray. If you draw blindly from the top of the deck and you don't want to use it, you can instantly discard it. You don't have to automatically put it into your trip. And then you discard any of the cards that you don't want, or the card that you don't want. You're going to swap it with one of them in your tray, and you're going to put it into one of the 3 face-up piles. And when a player has all of their days connected correctly, they win the game. So when you can make a valid trip. There are 3 ways to travel. If you're traveling by foot, bordering state cards can be placed side by side. So you can go from Wisconsin to Illinois because they border each other. If you use an automobile, states can be connected by driving through a third state which borders both of them, which a car would be placed in between them. So I could get to Indiana from Wisconsin by putting a car in between and driving through Illinois. The car takes the place of Illinois in that case. Or you can travel by air. The states on the map are all divided into different colors. So you can travel between 2 states of the same color if you use the same colored airplane in between them. And there are 2 exceptions to that, which are Alaska and Hawaii, which are their own color, a separate color. They're kind of like a wild destination. You need to fly to them. And the color of the state that you're leaving, so California is green. If I was leaving from California, I would need a green plane to then put the card for Alaska. And then if I'm going to Arizona, which I think is tan, I would need a tan plane in between them.
And just for our younger listeners, factually, you are able, in real life, you could drive to Alaska. You cannot drive to Hawaii. Sending it back to you, Doug.
But not without staying in the United States, though.
Correct.
So
you would have to go through Canada.
Yes, the Canadians, the Canadian Rockies.
A lot of listeners in Canada. Careful with what you say there, Doug. And they love their nation.
I'm sorry.
Our dear friends, Canadians.
Sorry if I've said anything to offend.
Thank you.
So, the only other requirement is that you can have 2 automobiles next to each other, 2 planes next to each other, and you need to start your trip in a state and end in a state. So you can't begin with an airplane. That's it. That's the whole game. That's how you play it. And it is, for a simple game, it is very awesome.
Yes.
The tension of this game, there is not a lot of communication going on throughout the game. Everybody kind of is focused on their own thing, but the interaction of watching that discard pile, what people are picking up, what they put down,
there's a lot
the
of
whole
quiet
game.
interaction. Yeah.
Yeah, you are interacting, but not this is not a chatty, friendly, hey, let's, eat some pretzels and play this game and chit chat about what happened at work today. You kind of have to head down, get in it, but that tension of now the other part of it is that there's only 1 card of each state, and there are only 2 planes of each color. So you're trying to jockey in position. It's like you don't want to be in a situation where you're literally waiting for Tennessee to come up, and that's the only thing that will work. Otherwise, you may be waiting a long time, or Michael may have that already in his trip.
Yeah.
And I'm completely unaware of that. So that tension of, can I do this, and how do I unjumble the jumble, is what makes this game so fun.
And the other tension piece is there's an unknown endpoint. You basically declare yourself the winner. And so from the deal, I mean, we played a game recently where I only needed 2 cards after the deal. And yet every card that came out just made my trip worse and worse and worse and worse. So here I was on the deal thinking like, oh, I'm going to win this one. This is going to be a 4-turn game. All I got to do is get that card out, done. And so I'm trying not to convey any of that to the other people at the table. Meanwhile, Doug is just trucking along, swapping cards in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. Okay, he just put a card down. I now finally have it about 8 turns later than I thought I would. And I go to pick up the card, and Doug goes, well, I made my trip. There it is. Boom, 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 boom. Really inefficient. Look where I'm going. Going there to going here, going to Nebraska, going back to Iowa, going down to Missouri. Look at that. Yep, done. Won. And there's that sense of, I was really upset, but all I could be upset with was myself. And I like that tension of not knowing when the game's going to, how close is the person to my left and my right to winning?
Yeah, I think this is a really good game. We talk a lot about tactical and strategic thinking on the podcast as skills that you can learn, but I think this is a really good game of once you start playing it several times, and it is a game that I think every time I've played it, and I'm usually not a person that's like, all right, let's play that again or let's run it back. I'm usually, all right, I'm ready to move on. I have not played this game once in a setting. I've always played it 2 or 3 or 4 times in a row because it goes so fast, and you always feel like, ooh, I was so close. I was 1 card away. I was 2 cards away. And that almost, that close but no cigar keeps you coming back to the table. But getting back to the strategic and the tactical part of this is that I think this is a really good game of highlighting the idea of keeping your options open. And if you put blinders on in this game and just focus on it needs to be Tennessee, you're going to be disappointed. And you need to be like, yeah, everything is going good here, but I can see how this card, I got to keep it moving, basically. And I like that about this game because it's important in not only in gaming but in life to just you put your blinders on, that can,
you're in trouble.
Cause more problems than even though I'm really close.
And at the same time, you can also, I don't want to say luck into, but things can go from being really bad, and then all of a sudden the right card comes out.
Yeah.
And it's like, ooh, Georgia, that will work really well right here. And I don't want to run to the tray with my right hand, but I just want to casually be like, yeah, I suppose I'll take Georgia. Even though finally now I could see how a route would all work together. So there's a nice way that it can fall into place. It also can really fall apart. But because of the length of time, what you talked about, we've always ran it back. We've always played at least 2 games. You have a bad game, that's okay. I'd like to play again. It's trying a puzzle. I don't want to compare it to Wordle or to another puzzle, but it has that same sense of, okay, I could do this right now. It could be done in 10 to 15 minutes, and I'd like to play some more.
Yeah, how do I make it work? I think is the biggest situation. And there are some, if you've got kids that have trouble kind of keeping a poker face, this is a great game for that. Because my daughter, who's 12, the first time that we played this, every once in a while you may be in a situation where, and we played this just last night, so I have reference for that, but there was a card where I'm like, I have this card that just needs to be 1 space over, and so you swap it out, and you hope that it stays there on the discard pile, and you can grab it back up on your next turn and swap it, because there's no other way to move it farther down the line.
Yeah, that's a really good point. But the risk
is that it gets covered up by somebody else's discard. So then and then you keep going back to that? Well, the first time that we played this game, my daughter would get frustrated every time a card got covered up that she needed. And then it became apparent to everybody at the table what areas she was looking for, what colors.
Yeah, I
And
was sitting to her right, so then I wasn't being very helpful.
And so then people are going to keep covering it up. Well, you know
Yeah.
what? She's learned to keep her mouth shut now at the table because that's information. But she needed to be there where it's like, I can't show that. And not that we're trying to create unemotional robots, but in the course of that game, sometimes you just need to be quiet and keep your mouth shut.
Composure's a great skill. And
Yeah,
it's not one we
exactly.
talk a ton of. But last night, the same thing was happening. All I needed was a car. And Doug kept covering it up. And the first time he did it, I know it wasn't intentional. But then I'm trying to be kind of like, a little country charm and like, I'll just discard this down here to uncover the car. And then, he kept doing it. Well, all I needed was that car to win. And it's that. Those are the moments that a 15-minute game can give you that, a 2-player game. And a 3-player game can give you lasting memories that we'll be talking about for years to come with your kiddo. So there's a lot in this box.
And then I finally put down the card that he's been waiting for the whole time, but I'm done with my trip, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So the thing to be aware of with this game is that if you're playing with younger gamers, as I alluded to with my daughter, it can be frustrating. There are times where you're waiting for a certain card to come out, and I keep using Tennessee for an example for no apparent reason, but I'm waiting for Tennessee, it comes up, and then Michael takes it.
Yeah.
And now what? Or in Michael's case, it's like, I'm looking for a car, and it keeps getting covered up, and I can't get one. It can be frustrating for younger players. It can be frustrating for older players. However, the speed of the game goes by so fast, and the pros of the tension and the puzzle and figuring it out overcome that so strongly, in my opinion, that it's negligible.
Yeah.
And
no,
and especially
that's a really
like
good point.
For the most part, unless you show you have your heart on a sleeve and show your emotions like that, in most cases, all of that is unintentional. So it's not somebody's like, I'm purposely covering that up. I had no idea Michael's looking for a car. I just know I don't need it.
Yeah.
Type of thing.
Yeah.
So
You're
I
all
think
going after the same puzzle, and that design leads for some really interesting moments at the table.
The other thing I really enjoy about this is that even for somebody who, like, I know the geography of the United States.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It took a long time.
Sixth grade social studies.
But even I am amazed by sometimes where I'll have cards down and I'm like, oh, wait, those states are connected. That's like, I'm not in those parts of the country very often. Or, I mean, there was one time where I'm like, oh my gosh, that panhandle of Oklahoma sticks out. And it is, I spent, 2 or 3 turns looking for a connection to connect something.
Huh?
And I had it already.
Yeah.
And so I liked that there are those little gems of like, oh, I guess I can get from California through Nevada, to Colorado or whatever, or Utah and things like that, where they're just kind of little happy accidents that happen throughout the game.
Well, I think the map is a fantastic teaching tool, as a lot of Alan R. Moon's games are. I mentioned this within the last year. My wife just set up Ticket to Ride for our youngest as basically a geography lesson, and knowing that our youngest likes to play games. And I think 10 Days in the USA can do the same thing for anyone in that 7 to 10 to 11 range. Would a 7 or 8-year-old get frustrated playing this? Potentially. But as we've said multiple times, the game moves fast, and there's a lot of learning. The other thing it does, the map does a nice job of matching the colors with the cards. So there's something that just naturally happens about being able to eliminate a state. Although I might not know exactly what Connecticut is next to because I haven't grown up on the East Coast or Rhode Island or enter New Hampshire or other East Coast state there. Hello, listeners. But I can look down at the map and do a quick scan, and with the colors, I can narrow it down to one of those 2 states over there. And so there's some really good graphic design that's happened in the game, too, to help enforce some of that learning.
Yeah. Well, and each of the cards for the states has a little monument on it, and that has spurred some conversation with family as we've been playing, and why does this state have that, or what if this state should have this, or things like that. And it's not like there's a big biography on it, but it'll tell you where it's located, that area, which I think is kind of cool. And we talked about tactical thinking. Anytime you've got a map, you're going to have spatial perception, and we kind of hit on this a little bit, but it's not a skill we talk about a lot. But I think this game, because of its speed and what happens during the game, is really good. And that is the skill of empathy in the regards of winning and losing. Repeatedly playing of tabletop games helps students balance the highs of winning and the lows of losing. And I think this game does that really well, because you can play it 2 or 3 times fast. You're going to lose some of those games. You're going to lose some of those games in what seemed to be crushing fashion, because you were so close and you almost won, which is sometimes worse than getting just completely blown out. This game has that. The tension comes from feeling you're always 2 turns away from winning. You're so close all the time. And when you lose, and then you can run it back and play it 2 or 3 times, that really becomes a callus for younger players in a game like this, to learn that the high of winning and the low of losing, and to try and stay in the medium and feel good when you win, but don't feel so bad when you lose. And I think this game does an excellent job of that. And it's a skill we don't talk about as much as we probably should, and certainly one that is in a lot more kids' games.
Yeah.
And learning that with emotional maturity, that is not as big of an issue as kids get older.
It's good. It's real good.
And anything else?
No, you've covered the skills. I have some questions about the game. Is this the first version that you've played? Did you play the 2003 version? Okay, so and we are recording in 2024. The Op just recently released a version. It's really slick. And I have not played any of the older versions. The only thing that I will say for listeners when you get it, because I think there could be a little bit of surprise, the cards are awfully small. And not that that's a bad thing. It's just something to know. The entire game fits in a very small box, which can be nice because portable and all those reasons. But the cards, I have a hard time shuffling them.
Yeah.
So just wanted to put that one caveat out there, because I could see where, I'm looking at some of the pictures on Board Game Geek and some of the other websites that are out there, and I can see where I would think that this game is much larger than it is. It is the cards are pretty tiny, and the trays that they sit on are, it doesn't take up a ton of table space. So not that any of that's relevant, and I'm sure this game's going to be everywhere, and people will know that if they're listening to it. But I did just want to mention some of that.
Well, I'm curious to see how well this game does in this new printing, and we'll have to talk to Andrew from the Op about this the next time we see him. But in the past, they've released 10 days in Europe, 10 days in the USA, 10 days in Africa, 10 days in Asia, 10 days in the Americas, all different versions based on the same concept. And I would love to have updated versions of those, just based on, especially playing geography that I'm not familiar with to that level, and to just kind of get some of that awareness of, oh yeah, all right, these countries are right next to each other in Europe or Africa or whatever, would add a whole nother experience. But I feel like an educational value to me as an adult that I want to experience in comparison to a game like Ticket to Ride, same designer. But it's like, even when I'm playing the Europe, it's like, okay, they're all, European cities and stuff like that. But there is something about the connection of countries or states that is more of a macro, as opposed to getting down to the micro of city. And I'm curious to see if they'll reprint some of those other ones as well.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. I didn't know about the other. I knew the 10 days in Europe. I'd heard that, but I didn't know there were all of the other versions in games until researching for this episode. It looks like we might have left out Aaron Weisblum. That was not by intention. I know we've talked a lot about Alan R. Moon. There is a second designer, Aaron Weisblum, who also designed Celestia, which was a game of the week that we both love and own. This is a good one. This is a really, really good game. I don't want to call it a filler. I don't want to call it this or that, or to kind of put it. I feel like it sits in its own category where it is an educational game that is a ton of fun. That's a nice little puzzle.
Yeah. So that is our game of the week. 10 Days in the USA by the Opoly. By the Opoly. Woo! 10 Days in the USA by the formerly USA Opoly. Give it a try if you get the chance. I think you'll enjoy it. Let's move on to the School of Gaming.
The School of Gaming. In the School of Gaming, we discuss concepts, keywords, etiquette, and helpful ideas in the world of gaming. This week, we're going to discuss handling disagreements about a game. Doug?
Yeah, so this is, it could certainly be taken two ways in the idea of what happens when there's a disagreement on a rule or something like that that's happening in the game. But this is more along the idea of what happens when you really like a game and somebody else doesn't really like that game.
An after-action report.
Yeah, and certainly Michael and I do a lot of gaming together, and sometimes there have been games that he really likes that I didn't care for, and vice versa. And it's easy to get kind of caught up in that, and it's like it shouldn't be that way. It should be newsflash. People like different things. Like,
yeah,
I don't get mad that Michael may like a different ice cream flavor than I do, and I think maybe what it comes down to, or why it sometimes seems more personal than it should be, is because I think people have a hard time separating the experience from the game, right? And so if Michael doesn't like a game that we just got done playing, is that a situation of he doesn't like the game, or he didn't like playing with me, or the experience that it was when we played that game, which then becomes... which is all wrapped up in the person's mind, because it's like I hardly ever think of that outwardly. But I think, so I never think about that when I dislike a game. But if somebody else dislikes the game, it's almost instinctually that I'm like, was it something I did? Was I too aggressive? Was I doing this wrong? And it's like, they're unrelated. People don't like all of the same things. Ultimately, it's okay. But I don't think people are alone in feeling that way. Especially
I think people... Go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Especially, I was just going to say, especially if people have a consistent game group.
Yeah.
Right? And that's where I've run into this. I know that oftentimes right after a game, there's a sense of, okay, now let's judge the game immediately. And sometimes I really like to do that, and I want to engage, and I want to see what other people's takeaways were. And other times... I resist that, because if it's an initial play, and if it's something where it might not be the game, it might be me, and so sometimes I will just get silent and think about, do some of that reflection. What parts of the game did I not enjoy or were not working for me, and what do I need to do differently? Am I just exhausted? Should I not be at the table playing? Should I be at home resting? Or did I misunderstand a rule? Did I have a preconceived perception of what I thought the game was going to be, and then it unraveled a different way? So at least for me, there are times where I really want to judge a game and break it down. And then there are other times where I just simply resist that sense of judgment and almost like hit a pause button.
Yeah.
And I don't get that with other media. I don't get that if I'm watching a show, if I'm listening to music, if I'm listening to a podcast, if I'm reading a book, I'm very quick to abandon other forms of media, entertainment. But I think games just fit in a unique space, especially if I'm playing them with other people.
Yeah, it's not like you, and maybe it's hard to say because it's like, it's not like after you watch a movie, and you can be watching a movie with other people, right? And you all walk out of the movie theater and you can talk about what you liked or didn't like. I can only think of a handful of times I walked out of the theater and was like, wow, like I don't even know what to say. Like that's that's a rarity. But I mean, even as we're going to talk about our high fives, like there are moments where my initial gut reaction is, I don't know if I like that game. And then you know what? 3 days later, I'm still thinking about that game.
Yeah.
And then I want to keep playing it. But my original thought right after is like, I never want to see this again.
Yeah.
And I think that is unique in games that, you have a meal, you taste it, and you're like, I didn't care for it. And you don't feel bad about offending the chef. He's not there. you know?
Yeah, that's interesting. The chef analogy, the restaurant analogy is interesting because the more that I've played games, I think the better I've got at just listening to what other people's perception is of the game and separating that from how I should be interpreting the game. I think when I first came into the hobby, if somebody said something about the game, there was a sense of, oh yeah, I need to agree with their statement about it. And so if you don't like a game and you know it and you're talking to somebody else about it right afterwards, I've gotten much better over time at just listening to what you're saying and still making up my own opinion. And I think that just comes from repeated plays and just an understanding that different people like different games and not every game is going to work for everybody. At the same time, the other side of the coin is being able to let people know, well, I actually did like that game, and here's why. I think that's a great part of the hobby. It's one of the few places where you could still have just straight logical rhetoric. I mean, you can form an argument and go back and forth as long as the other person on the other side is willing to listen. If they're just going to say, nope, you're wrong, and I'm going to tell you why. Well, do I really even, why would I even?
Well, I think it gets hard. I think it gets hard when the emotions get to the edges, right? When somebody really likes a game and the other person, or somebody really dislikes it. And I think going back to even on top of the idea of like, did I make a bad experience? It's like if I really love a game and then you just vehemently hate it, there is an ownership for some reason. I don't know why. Like we said, ice cream is completely different. If somebody likes Hawaiian pizza, I don't care.
Yum.
But there is something that's like a personal, like almost feels like a personal attack of like, what's wrong with me that I like this game so much?
Yeah. If that's real. That happens, right?
If that person hates it so much, and it's like, ooh, I thought we had similar tastes, or what am I missing? Whether it's, and like Wandering Towers is a good example of a game that you enjoyed. Mm-hmm. After I got done playing it, I'm like, I don't really like this, but I don't know why. And everybody else seems to like it, but I feel weird that I'm looking for ways like, what did I do? The same thing that you were saying is like, was I too tired when I played it? Did I go into it with the wrong attitude? Should I try it again? And then the argument could be made, why would you ever try something again that you don't like? Like, let it go and be fine. There's 3,000 games coming out every year.
Well, and that cliche of agreeing to disagree, in a hobby where you're talking about what you just said, 3,000 games a year, I think what comes into where some feelings occur, because there's thoughtfulness that goes with bringing a game to the table, right? I'm going to use your time. This is the greatest resource you have. I'm going to use that right now. And
Yeah.
I'm going to try to convince you that you're going to have a good time. And then when you get to the end of that social contract and the person's like, no, that was actually very lame. Now the person who put the thoughtfulness into this, almost like a gift, it has that sense of, oh,
Thank
I
you for
failed.
wasting my time.
I wasted their time, so
Yeah.
I must be lame. And I think, and this is something you and I have definitely got better at over time, but with other people too, and just seeing at conventions and just hearing about the hobby in general, it's okay if you don't like a game, and it's okay if somebody else likes a game. But maybe that's a radical opinion.
Well, probably. I think the big takeaway, and this comes into situations where you have a consistent game group, or maybe you have a situation where it's like, I've got one buddy that plays games with me, and that's it. You don't have the luxury of a game group, and it becomes a situation where I've bought this game, and nobody else that I know likes it or wants to play it with me. Then it's the idea of like, I have in my notes, like, don't guilt trip, like, don't keep bringing it up, just be okay, like, and maybe that means that you have to move on from the game yourself, or be content of, you're going to play it at a convention or find another way to get it played. But it can be really tiresome, and I'm not speaking from experience, so but the idea of like, oh, I really want to play this game, and let's get this game played, or can we play that? Like, Costa's like, oh, you got any games you want to bring over? Can we play this? Nobody here likes this. Stop bringing it up.
Well, and that's where being unclear is being unkind, right? Just be very clear with folks about, I don't have any interest in playing that. Great. That's all I needed to know. So now I'll take that to my local regional convention. I'll play it solo. I'll take it to a meetup. And that's where I think early on, as groups are forming or as new people are coming in, there's a little bit of a sorting out process. But the quicker people can get to normalizing, what game are we playing and do you have interest in playing it, I think the better off people are with handling disagreements when they come up.
Yeah, and some people are really good at going with the flow and playing whatever is put in front of them. Like, there are people like that, and then there are some people that are further along in their journey and know exactly what they like and don't like from experience, and trying to juggle all of that. I mean, I guess the biggest thing comes down to, don't be a jerk if you don't like a game, and don't be and on the flip side, don't be offended if somebody doesn't like the game that you love. Right? Those are the two sides of the coin. It's okay to not like a game, but you don't have to be a jerk about it. And if somebody doesn't like the game that you love, that's okay too. You can still love the game.
And you can still own it. It can still stay in your collection because it's your collection. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So let us know on Discord how you guys handle disagreements within your game group on either what to play or when people like and don't like stuff. And I'm sure that's especially, I know that there's some husband and wives that are in the Discord, and that's probably comes up with them too. It's like, what happens when your spouse doesn't like your favorite game, and navigating those waters. So we'd like to hear what you guys think. Let's move on to the high five. If you're anything like us, you're constantly on the hunt for new games to try out. This week, Michael and I are going to be sharing our high five surprise games. These were games that, for whatever reason, the expectation was low, or we went into it not expecting much and came out on the other side completely different. And it's an interesting list. A lot of the games on my list are games that other people brought to me, and I was not expecting much from, or nothing at all, and was surprised how much I enjoyed them. And every one of these is now in my collection.
Yeah.
How'd you go into this one?
Low expectations with a lasting impression. So what were games that, I was open to trying it, open to playing it. I didn't, block it. But then after, it was like, oh, that was awesome. I want to play it again. Can we run that back? I really want to play that again. I want to play that with one of my kids, or I want to play that game with my wife, or I need to really figure out a way to get that in my collection. I think I'll jump in with number 5, if that's okay.
Yeah.
This is the one game I don't own, and that's Santa's Workshop 2nd edition. Repeat, 2nd edition. The 1st edition is kind of ugly. Sorry, Rio Grande Games. I know you're not a fan of our podcast because we tell it how it is. What's that?
I said that probably would have lived up to your expectations.
No, the first
one.
You
would have went in
there's
low
a backstory
and
to
ended
this.
low. Okay.
But yeah, and coming right off the segment we just had, you and I were texting back and forth of what game are we going to play, and I was in the middle of basketball season, so my mind was really just relying on. I had offloaded all my learning of games to Doug for about 2 months, and you said Santa's Workshop, and I looked it up on Board Game Geek, and I thought, oh my gosh, we're doing Christmas just got over. This is what we're doing, and then we got over there, and it's just a beautiful game with worker placement and a little bit of set collection, and there's a basic version or a beginner version and an advanced version, and I was like, wow, I want to play this again. And February rolled around, I was like, hey, can we play some more Santa's Workshop? I know we've already done it as a game of the week, but I'd really like to play that one again. Yeah. It's a game that I will continue. Go ahead.
So you originally looked up the original version.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you imagine how that would leave me with low expectations? And at that time we were playing great games too, one great game after another. So I'm like, well, Doug sees something in this. I'll go with it. And
Rio Grande's best looking game.
So I didn't shout out the designer. I'll do that homework because this was one that I knew was in that number 5 spot. It was just so fresh, so recent. Santa's Workshop 2nd edition.
Keith Ferguson.
Fun game.
Keith Ferguson is the designer.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was looking at the original artwork, so I had it fresh.
Yeah.
All right, my number 5 is a game called Flip Ships. This is from Renegade Game Studios by designer Kane Klenko. Came out in 2017. And when it was brought over, it's like, all right, we're going to play a dexterity Space Invaders game. And I'm not amazing at dexterity. And during the rules teach, it was kind of a little bit clunky. But once we started playing, that you had little ships that okay, this ship is going to shoot now, and it's got special abilities, and you've got ships with special abilities, flicking discs, trying to land them on cards on the table, and then the big showdown at the end when you're trying to destroy the mother ship by basically making a basket with the discs, flicking them across the table, and it's just been a blast every time I've played it, and I never would have expected it. It came out around a time where I'd played, what was that game? Flick 'em Up. There was a handful of dexterity games that were coming out at the time, and it was like, I don't want to play another dexterity game. And we started playing. I'm like, this really is like Space Invaders.
Yeah.
And I think I could get my dad to play it because all he has to do is stand up and come over here and flick, and it's fun. And so it caught me off guard, and that was Flip Ships.
That's awesome. I came in at the tail end of a game at game night when y'all were playing it once, so I don't think I've actually played this. I know I've seen it on your table. I'm familiar with it. Maybe it's just because I've stared at the box for the last several years at headquarters, but yeah, I'd love to give that one a try. All right, number 4 for me is a game that I heard described on a lot of different podcasts. I'm like, that game sounds dumb, and that is First Rat. It actually, not only is it not dumb, it was a game of the week, dearest listeners, and it's made more than one high five list and a few recently, but we covered that back in episode 116 as our game of the week. And I'm not very good at describing this game. What I will say, the lasting impression that Gabrielle Osiello and Virginio Gili's game and Dennis Lohausen's beautiful art has left with me is, that's a cool little worker placement game where you're trying to build a spaceship and be the first rat to get to the moon. There's something very unique about First Rat. Lightweight, midweight Euro game that is family friendly, cute art, really easy to teach. It plays in under an hour. That was one that I was very skeptical about when you first got it out onto the table. And boy, it didn't take long to work its way into my collection. So Pegasus Spiel is the publisher here in North America. Number 4 for me, First Rat.
Yeah, that's a great one. I think the theme and the artwork and the way that all works together just really sells that game and makes it something special.
And the gameplay is fun. It's just a fun little. You got little
it's
races
fun because of the theme, right?
Yeah.
It's got that scurrying, and I'm collecting these cans, and I'm collecting this stuff. So great choice there. My number 4, I had a buddy that was getting this game, and he asked me if I wanted a copy, and I said sure. And it was the idea of a under 2-hour civilization game, and that to me is like the holy grail, and I want that. I want to be able to upgrade tech and do all that stuff. And so we sat down and we played Tapestry. And I alluded to this one last segment. And I got done playing it, and I'm like, I don't like this game. But and I'm like, now what am I going to do with this? I got to sell this copy. But it just come out, so it was kind of hot. And the other guy that bought it for me bought the 2 copies. He's like, well, I'm selling mine. And I kept thinking about it. I'm finding myself walking out to the mailbox the next day, and I'm thinking about this game. I'm thinking about what I could do differently. I'm thinking about, wow, I really liked how that comboed up like that. I liked how this worked. I liked how that worked. And then all of a sudden, I'm keeping it. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, this might be one of my favorite games. I love playing this game. And, I mean, there are caveats to it that there are, in the game that I played, the first one, there's been a bunch of errata to this game, and power things have been toned down in their power.
Now, explain errata to our listeners who are newer listeners for the first time.
That would be a change to the rule books or a power that happens after the game is released.
Rebalancing and change, yep.
Yeah, so there are some things that were, after thousands of plays, people have determined this is too strong. And I'll be honest, I've had games of this that are disasters, and I've had games that are good. And sometimes when they're disasters, it's like, God, that's a long time to sit through that and not turn out good. But I still love the game. I love the components. I love looking at it. I love the idea of, like, I will try and be as efficient as possible to take as many turns as I can before I need to reset for the round, and figuring out how I can squeeze every little bit of opportunity and action out of it. And it went from being a game that I played, I was kind of hyped for. Afterwards, I was disappointed in, and then I could not shake it from my brain, and surprised me that it became as enjoyed as it is in my house. So that is my number 4, Tapestry.
Awesome. Yeah, less than 24 hours ago, I was at your house, and you were putting together the foam insert for it. So who would have known 5 years ago, huh?
Yeah, shout out to Folded Spaces for that awesome thing.
Unbelievable. Yeah, they do a great job. My number 3, is that where we are?
Yeah.
My third is Seven Wonders Architects 2021. And again, this is another game of the week. I don't mean to just bring up game of the week, just tracking that in real time, all the way back in episode 51. It doesn't feel that long ago. But I'm not a big fan of Seven Wonders. And part of that is because of my co-host here, who's amazing at it, and then another person in our game group, I don't have a chance. And so I've been doubled up and tripled up, and I've tried, but Seven Wonders for me just doesn't work. So I went into Seven Wonders Architect.
I'm not still just upset about it.
What's that? You're still upset about it. Hey, we just came off that segment of Handling Disagreements, man, and I've tried. But Seven Wonders Architects for me, I love this game. I'll play this game any day of the week. And I just absolutely love the little trays that sit between the player on my left and the player on my right. I love how each of the wonders are slightly different and give off slightly different abilities. And again, I said, if you want to get a full deep dive, go to episode 51. The other thing about it, it plays so fast with up to 7 players. At GameholeCon 2022, Doug and I played with 3 other people, full game. I don't know if it was a half hour. I don't know if it was 45 minutes, but it was done just as quick as if you played with 2 players. And I that's definitely my favorite game in the Seven Wonders universe. I used to own Duel. I used to own Seven Wonders. I think I will always have Seven Wonders Architects. If I made a personal top 50, it would be in there. That game works for me. And so Antoine Bauza and Repos, just a beautiful, beautiful little game.
Yeah, awesome. Going backwards, we talked about Tapestry in episode 106, by the way. My number 3, we've got a buddy that brings a lot of space games over. And so, and if he's listening, he knows who he is. But, another space game, all right, set it up. And then we played it, and then it was awesome. And that is the Artemis Project.
Yeah.
My expectations were low just based on the theme, and I don't want to get into a big space game. But the way that this game uses dice placement as workers, and the way that it balances out having high dice and low dice and the benefits of where you place them is what I really like about this game, in that in some cases a low roll is good, and other times you want high. And so it really balances that whole system out, as opposed to, I rolled a bunch of 1s. Those are useless. Thanks. I guess I'm going to get walloped in this round. And Artemis Project does a great job of sorting that out. It's published in 2019 by the Grand Gamers Guild, Daryl Chow and Daniel Rochi. Just a fun game, and balancing your little space station and acquiring resources and going on missions. It has all of those kind of space tropes with it, but in a cool, light hobby package. So that is my number 3, Artemis Project.
Yeah, that's great. Great game. One we haven't discussed as a game of the week, but you never know. We plan on being here for a while. That probably should have made my list, because I had a very similar experience as to what you just described. Number 2 for me is Take 5. Also goes by 6 Nimmt, 1994 card game. We covered it on episode 144. We did Take 5 and No Thanks as a combo game of the week. Designer Wolfgang Kramer, published in North America by Amigo. I just cannot tell you the type of impression this game has given to others that I play with. Extended family, immediate family. It's one that I've gotten fairly good at teaching, because I've taught it a lot to a lot of different people. And so, yeah, I love the game, and I was surprised by how much I loved the game. But the impression for me is that this is a game that I know other people are also going to enjoy, by and large. And in Take 5, you've got 5 rows of cards, and you're trying to, on your turn, you're going to throw down a card, and you're hoping that it fits numerically in order in one of the rows that's out there. Because if it's the 6th card in a row, you've got to take those 5 cards and bring them in to your hand. And you don't want cards in your hand at the end. Every card has a little bull on it, and the bulls count for negative points. And it's done quickly. It plays well with kids. It plays well low player count, high player count. Super cheap. Super cheap. I mean, the op is selling this thing for like $10. Not the op. Sorry, Andrew. Got my publishers and companies mixed up. Corey. Amigo is selling this very, very affordably. I see it at a lot of different places. So that was my number 2, is Take 5.
Yeah, and that one is almost a surprise. You kind of mentioned it too, the idea of like, have never introduced it to somebody that didn't instantly like it or love it.
Yeah.
Right? It has that thing, and I would not have expected that to be the case. So my number 2 was purchased. I bought this based on the theme and being a game schooling podcast and feeling like we need to have educational stuff and things like that. And at the time, I think I bought it for $7, which is insane. And we talked about it in episode 37, and that is Power Failure from Artana, published in 2021. I was like, I was not expecting this to be as good as it is, and that little element of dexterity and power plant and the way that it thematically ties into the idea of, oh yeah, I'm getting a lot of points from these coal plants, but I'm also creating a lot of pollution, and that means I got to stack carbon on top of each other. And I've enjoyed it as a great little 2-player game. Michael and I played it in a coffee shop one time, and was not expecting it for the price. And I'm almost to the point of, this is also a surprise that I'm surprised nobody else talked about this ever.
And they still don't talk about it. I mean, it's
That
a
it
great little
just
game.
came
You're
and
firing
gone.
off your... Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, and I in relation to to COVID, I might have got lost in the shuffle, but I'm just surprised that didn't become a bigger thing. So it's a surprise for me, and a surprise that it's not bigger as well. So that's my number 2, Power Failure.
Great call, Doug. Yeah, same. I have very low. Yeah, you said it all. That was great. Number 1 for me is one that's gotten a little bit of buzz recently with a Spiel nominee. But when I saw I'll be frank, Doug and I saw this at a demo a few years back, and I just was not impressed with what I saw, and that's the Guild of Merchant Explorers. Mm-hmm. So I walked by it at a demo at a trade show, and I couldn't wait to get away from it because it was just like, oh man, I really like Matthew Dunstan and Brett J. Gilbert, but that demo was not very good. And then got it to the table the first time, like, okay, I want to see the other maps now. It was one of those first impressions, even playing the full game. I wasn't sure that I was playing it quite right all the way through. And then I went on a binge I was looking up my logged plays here while Doug was talking about Power Failure, in late 2022, in October of 2022, and I soloed the heck out of it and thoroughly enjoyed it, and ended up picking up the expansion map for it. And it's a game that I think I like more than most right now. I really enjoy building the routes. I enjoy when the routes get cut off. I enjoy the different maps. You have different objectives within the maps. And the other thing about the game, there's a turn structure where you don't quite know what action is going to come up next. So there's a little bit of planning that can be done, but by and large, you have to be very tactical as you're playing. It is a game where I'm prone to AP in the game. I know that, how I play it. So for me, it does work really well solo because I can control my turn, and I can take 3 minutes on a turn and not bother anyone else at the table. But that's the one for me that's number 1 on my list. Guild of Merchant Explorers from AEG, Matthew Dunstan, Brett J. Gilbert. Yeah, that's a tricky one for me always because I really enjoy the gameplay of it, and I feel like functionally there's just I wish it was either a roll and write or an app. I would love, like, where's the Guild of Merchant Explorers app? I'd be playing it all the time. So interesting that was a. But yes, I was also there for that demo, and I can attest that I did have the same expectations, except mine was, I think that's a better game than I'm being presented right now. And I couldn't remember if you were standing next to me or if I went through that demo alone. Okay.
Nope, I was right there.
Same
and
place.
I'm like,
okay. Yep.
You are not doing a great job. I'm sorry.
We're all trying our best, Doug.
Yes. So my number 1, believe it, there was a time that I did not play board games or was aware that this was even a thing. And we went to another couple's house, and they said, hey, do you want to play a board game? And I'm like, okay, yeah, whatever. And they pull out, and only people that have been in the hobby for a while will know what the Catan cover used to look like which looks like very homely homesteaders with wheat and scythes, and they pull this out, and I'm like, what is this? What am I getting into? This is a disaster. And the game was amazing, and I loved it, and I was like blown away coming from, the only games I'd played up to that point are Euchre, Monopolies, and every other Milton Bradley game that is ubiquitous in the universe. And I was like, wait, we're rolling the dice, but the dice don't tell me where I move. And it's like a little payout every time the dice are rolled. I'm getting stuff, and it feels like I'm in a little casino. I'm getting all these goods, and then I'm using them to buy and build stuff. It just totally changed my world. And obviously where we are now and what I'm doing proves that. But seeing that cover, and if you haven't seen it, go on Board Game Geek. It was called Settlers of Catan before that happened. And it just, it does not look like a game that you would ever find on a modern board game shelf nowadays. It looks like it came out, like this was from the 1930s, and we're going to play this heirloom game, and it was just a delight. So the fact that it got me into the hobby, and I expected so little from it, is why it had to be number one. It was the one I knew was going there for sure, and that's Catan, or in my case, Settlers of Catan.
Yeah, or in some parts of the Midwestern United States, just Settlers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, they look like settlers, that's for sure.
With the warp tiles, with the coasters that are bent, because
yes, and, it's the bane of my existence. Like, these won't lay flat. What do you got? Any honorable mentions?
Yeah, I do. Honorable mention number one for me is Agricola. I got into that. I was late to the Agricola game. I just got into it in 2023, but man, I went into it with low expectations, and I had that Uwe moment where it's, ooh, this game. I can see why this works for so many people. I really like this game, and it's one that I hope I play at least once a year for as long as I'm in the hobby. It's left that type of impact for me. And the other one is Tapple. Little word game. The first time I played it with you and your daughter, and then my daughter jumped into the game very soon after, and next thing I know, I'm driving around Wisconsin trying to pick up a copy for it because it was in only select Targets at the time, and it was one that she wanted for her birthday, one that still gets played regularly enough in our house. So those are the two honorable mentions that I have. How about you?
I've got Tumbling Dice, which was another one that I was like, what is this? We're just rolling down, and had a blast. It's a dexterity game. You're trying to land dice down this little kind of stairway thing. Love it so much that I worked with my dad, and we built a custom one out of walnuts. So it's beautiful. And then the other one is Herbaceous, which is a little game about planting herbs that one of those that was way ahead of the nature game when that came out. And at the time, I'm thinking, really, we're playing a game about herbs? And it was awesome. It's got great tension in it. And you had mentioned something there about Target, which I didn't make a note of earlier, but I wanted to talk about it. I know that there have been some people that, especially on our Discord, that have talked about wanting and not even being able to see Penny Press. And I saw that in Barnes & Noble.
Okay.
So it was a Target exclusive, but it is available elsewhere now. So,
well, I should have thrown that on my honorable mention, because that was another one that I saw at Gen Con.
Sure.
I'm like, nah, that's a dud game.
Or not Penny
two
Press.
sides
What's
of the
it
book.
called? Penny Black. Sorry.
Penny Black. That's another one where I saw it and you were excited. I was like, I'll try it with an open mind. And halfway through that first game, I want to beat Doug here. This is great. Let's run this back. I mean, the little plastic tiles that look like stamps and getting everything to fit. Yeah, isn't that great when that happens? When you go into a game with low expectations and then just completely shocked by how awesome it is?
Yeah. So that is going to do it for us this week. Let us know some games that surprised you. Love to hear about if there's any games that we've talked about as games of the week that maybe when we talked about it, you're like, I don't know if I really care for that. And then you happen to play it somewhere and you're like, oh, that was awesome. Or games that you got to try out that were games of the week that turned out really cool as well. Let us know about that. Gameschooler.com/Discord. Sign up for that. Subscribe to the podcast. Follow us on X at GameSchoolerU. Again, leave those 5-star reviews and help us get a little bit more out there. I think we've got great content that I'd love to share with as many people as possible. Next week, I know we're going to be probably talking about Ex Libris. I want to talk about the idea of theme chasing. Michael, doesn't even know what this is about, but the idea of companies coming out with a game that becomes a super hit and then everybody else following suit with the same theme or kind of genre that gets overloaded, and then just have a little discussion about that. And I'm not sure exactly what we're going to do for the high five, but we will have something there as well.
Yeah,
so
we got time.
Thank you so much for spending the last hour or so with us. We truly appreciate it.
Now get out there and keep gaming.